I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Just days after Rex Heuermann was arrested for a series of murders in Long Island, the class of '83 had a reunion. This year, this July, was their 40-year anniversary. What I would have done to be a fly on that wall, I mean, if there's ingredients for a Stephen King novel, this is it. What did Heuermann's classmates make of the monster they'd helped create, or had that thought never occurred to them? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Big props to Brad Hardy for the intro. I didn't even ask for it. He just sent it to me as a gesture. Really appreciative. I really have needed a proper, slick intro to this channel. So thank you very much for just out of the blue sending that to me. If you guys are interested in Brad's work, I'll put a link to his Instagram in the description. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment. Look out for some additional content on the Titanic and Titan coming up in the next few days. You can also hit the thanks button and let's get started. To be fair, Heuermann's class was the class of '81. Since he was born in 1964, it looks like he graduated at 17. Isn't that quite young? Wasn't that younger than the other kids? Another thing to mention is this really insightful, this incredibly useful, descriptive behind-the-scenes article was written by two journalists who work for the New York Times, seasoned journalists from the New York Times who graduated from the same school. And so it's no wonder that they know this sort of thing. It's typically very, very hard to get this kind of detail when, journalists go into a situation like that. They are not going to, people who see these journalists as strangers are not going to share what they think with them. And of course, this is not that situation. Corey Kilgannon and Nate Schweber were kids who went to Berner High School in 1984, and so they know this fabric inside out, and they're the perfect people to report on this case. And that is why the article is so useful, insightful, informative. A few snippets from the article. He was a loner and a target. He was everybody's punching bag. He got picked on a lot. He would take it and walk away. I seen him push to his limit. In 6th grade, a group of students singled out the tall, awkward boy, that's Heuermann, and tried to beat him up. After being stopped by a teacher, they tortured him verbally. Those are all excerpts from the article. Now think about some of those words, tortured. We know that word from the fabric of this case. We know that it's associated with what he did to the victims, but also what he did verbally to family members afterwards. So aren't we talking about a kind of psychological revenge here? Then also the word singled out. Isn't that what the suspect allegedly did when he chose his victims? To quote again from the article, he was disillusioned. He was the type of guy, if he snapped, he could really hurt you. I love the way the New York Times describes the swampy area where Heuermann grew up, spawning baby fish. Some, like the Baldwin brothers and Jerry Seinfeld, went on to become very big fish. They went to New York and they became very big fish. Now, if you're in high school and you're already feeling inadequate, and then someone in one of your peers goes on and makes it big in the world, that makes that inadequacy, that resentment, that jealousy even worse, doesn't it? According to the article, quote, Mr. Heuermann came of age in a New York suburb laid out on a tight grid of streets an hour from Midtown Manhattan, with measures of celebrity and notoriety alike. It spawned the acting Baldwin brothers and Jerry Seinfeld, but also Joey Buttafuoco, the swaggering auto body guy whose teenage mistress Amy Fisher shot his wife Mary Jo at her front door in 1992. Notorious crimes became part of the local law, including serial killers like the son of Sam who terrorized nearby Queens, and Joel Rifkin, who went to high school several towns away in East Meadow. So once again, you've got people who are from the area, went to school with Heuermann, lived in the area, from the same fabric, bringing up the same issue of some people went on and lived happily ever after. They had spectacular careers like meteorites, firing across the night sky. And then somebody else doesn't. And so within this fabric, you've got stars in the sky, and then you've got graves in the fabric, in the same spawning ground. What's up with that? Now, you know what? If you head to the Wikipedia page for Massapequa, it reads like a who's who of notable people. I don't know most of them. Maybe you guys know a lot more of them than I do, but I do know Alec Baldwin. I do know Neil Diamond. I have heard of Steve Guttenberg and a lot of other musicians on this list. I'm also very familiar with Charlie Kaufman, written a lot of amazing screenplays. And on the list goes on. Now imagine that ship with all of those luminaries, sails, and you're not on it. Not only do some of your peers get their cakes and eat them, including these kids who went on to become journalists at the New York Times. I mean, that's a publication I've tried to write for. That's a publication I've always aspired to be associated with. I've been publishing many publications. New York Times didn't quite cut it. And so some people go to New York and they get their cakes and they eat them. But you don't even get your cake. That's a recipe for resentment and unhappiness. And unhappiness is comparison. I mean, when I look at the easy life some of my rivals are having on YouTube, I feel it instantly. You feel this instant teeth-grinding resentment, but you've got to let it go. You've got to deal with the cards you have and use the hands you have, which is what I mentioned in the last two videos. So I've got to say, I was intrigued when I started covering this case by the number of comments saying things like, how do you know he was a mama's boy? And I was bullied at school and I turned out okay. Well, I doubt whether kids in higher grades and lower grades than you would remember you as a standout outcast the way Heuermann is remembered 40 years later. So we're talking about degrees and extremes that are definitely beyond the pale. According to the article, quote, Mr. Heuermann, unathletic and uncool, remained an outcast. That's according to Dan Musto, 55 years old, who said he knew him growing up. Dan Musto was about 4 years younger than Heuermann. Mr. Heuermann did join the drama club as a stagehand. In other words, after high school closed its doors and after the flocks of summer break had left their footprints and litter on the beach, when everyone went on to seek their fortunes, someone lay psychologically dead and damaged on the beach. Think about the beaches of D-Day, but just one person lying there. But it's the psychological shell of someone. According to the article, Heuermann remained removed from alumni groups, reunions, and eventual social media pages for graduates, even as bodies kept turning up on Gilgo Beach. So he chose to remain sort of by himself. But I mean, why would you want to go to a reunion where everybody treated you like crap and bullied you and humiliated you? Why would you want to be part of that? Why would you want to be reminded of that? It amazes me how obvious Heuermann was and is as a suspect. And yet the locals, riveted to what was happening, couldn't see any connection between their own collective past and present. And I still think perhaps some still don't see any connection. It's just interesting, before he was arrested, that there was this big mystery, who possibly could be responsible for these murders. No idea. I've got no idea. Now, going back to the article, for some last weekend, this is when the reunion was held, it was hard to reconcile the gawky shy kid on the margins with the man authorities call a sadistic serial killer, a killer who preyed on women who worked as escorts. And I think, again, what is so schizophrenic here is the sadism that was visited on this kid, right? where literally someone said, oh, I beat him up because somebody asked me to, where the inflicting of pain and abuse and humiliation and all of these things is done for the enjoyment and entertainment of everybody else. I mean, they benefit at his expense. That's literally what's going on. And so when there's sadism on the mirror's side of this whole equation, they don't understand it. Anyway, so the article goes on to point out that where this reunion was held, the building where it was actually held, was just a short drive and walking distance from the school's favorite beach, Tobay, which is also very close to where the bodies were found. Now, it's quite amazing, just like if you just imagine it like a movie. 1 minute you're standing on the beach where all of these kids were having fun, and obviously not Heuermann. Then you have Heuermann by himself, allegedly burying bodies, and now you cut to the reunion, and it's all buzzing and chatty, and people are excited and drinking and having a good time, and they're happy couples and success stories and memories of Johnny-come-latelys. But for once, Heuermann was actually being remembered and acknowledged in a social setting when he wasn't actually there. And nobody can kind of understand how did this happen? And so Michael Sean Fagan said, it's a shock, we knew him. And he was, according to the article, speaking above a room filled with animated conversation and blaring retro soundtrack. They were describing him as nerdy and smart. And someone said, you know what, when they arrested him, I wasn't surprised at all. That's according to Don Opfels. He attended kindergarten through 12th grade with Heuermann. And he said in a telephone interview, oh my God, it fits perfectly. That's the weird guy. He was a recluse, very quiet, said Mr. Opfels, a champion wrestler in high school and now a healthcare executive. You just saw him as a guy by himself. He barely spoke. How do you think that happened? Why does he barely speak? Well, because whoever he once was in high school, he was transformed into a crushed-in individual. Even his own father told him that he needed to be a go-getter. His father was tough on him, and that kind of made sense because we know that his father was a military dude. And so although it's a stereotype, you would imagine that he would be very rules-based and that he would be tough on his own son. And so in response to that, so Rex and his father were actually arguing and clashing with one another, and then his father suddenly died. But think about the enduring legacy of his father at the end of his life. His father tries to get his son back out of his shell, and then his father dies, and the shell closes, and the shell remains. But the message resonates inside it. It's like a gust of wind at night over a moonlit strand. It echoes to the inner chamber of that derelict shell for years. Come on, be a man, be tough. Make something of yourself, man. Be a go-getter. And then Heuermann enters adolescence with 3 older sisters and a younger brother and a domineering mother and a school that uses him as a punching bag. And then Heuermann enters adulthood and the overwhelm that is Manhattan. And then he gets divorced and he's back to square one. Outcast, loner, weakling, disillusioned, living in his mother's house. Let's step out of the narrative for a moment and ask a question. It's a familiar question in true crime. Now that we've identified someone, who else is to blame? Is the only person to blame here Heuermann, the guy who allegedly committed multiple murders? Is it just Heuermann who's to blame and Heuermann alone? Is it his classmates? Should they be put on trial? Is it his parents who didn't raise him right? How about his siblings? Is it his environment? Is it the lay of the land? Is it all the duck hunting between the bouts of bruising humiliation at school? Are the ducks to blame? Is it nature or nurture? Is it one or the other or a bit of both? If so, how much of the one, how much of the other? Naturally, part of the onus of who we are and who Heuermann became is up to us. as it was up to him. And I would say most of who we are is our fault or our responsibility. You're knocked down, how do you get up again? Do you get up again? And so we know with Heuermann, he didn't get up again for a really long time, and that was damaging. That wasn't healthy. That was certainly psychologically leading to dysfunctional. According to the article, John de Micoli, who grew up near Heuermann's rundown home on First Avenue, said that Rex preferred to remain at home and essentially opted out of social life. Can you blame him? What do you think he did with all those lonely hours? When he turned on his computer, when he lay in bed blinking at the darkness, what did he think about? What fantasies started to stir in those deep, dark sediments? When he was opting out of social life, what was he doing? Well, he's trying to escape. Why did he need to escape? Well, because it was so unpleasant, because it was so painful. Another thing I found strange and ironic was how many people have insisted that Heuermann's home is no different to any other house in the neighborhood. So he wasn't bullied, he wasn't a mama's boy, and his house, meaning his home, was absolutely the same as everyone else's. And that's how people think serial killers arise. Absolutely no connection to reality. They simply materialize out of thin air. They're demons and they're psychopaths.
Now,
we begin by coveting what we see every day.
I've got to say, if you think that way, then you are in the same kind of denial, the same kind of fantasy, not as bad and not as extreme, but it's the same kind of thing that he was caught up in. You just don't see any connection between yourself and the past. So serial killers aren't born, they're made by themselves and by us. So we also did this, but he did this also. He gives up on the world, yes, but also he covets. And there is a lot to covet between Long Island and Midtown Manhattan. And if you're saying, well, I don't see that, I'm very happy, but what about someone who isn't happy? There is a lot to covet for someone else. Someone else who perhaps was a loser and who didn't get their cake once upon a time. And, if you say, I don't see there's anything to covet between Long Island and Midtown Manhattan, there certainly was when I was there. So what is the lesson from this case? It's early, but we still have lots to learn. But I don't think it's too early to offer this suggestion. You have to rise above your raisin. That can be a life's work, or you can do it right now. It's up to you. No one's saying it's easy. Or perhaps you've already done it years ago. If you did, good for you. But the responsibility, the responsibility to get over what was done to you or what wasn't done is yours. No one's saying it wasn't traumatic, that it wasn't very horrible, very painful. But the longer you get caught up in self-pity and blaming someone else, the longer you're giving away an opportunity to change your life, to have the life that you want. So the ability to get over what was done to you, that is yours if you take responsibility. Even if it isn't, even if someone else is legitimately to blame for your lost fairy tale, they aren't going to care a damn to give it back to you. Blaming robs us of the little power we do have. Taking responsibility and blaming ourselves, strange as that sounds, puts responsibility back in our hands. You have to be your own savior.
Every man has to be his own savior.
And as soon as you see that, you can validate yourself. No matter how much the world has invalidated you, no matter how unfair or traumatic it was, take this psychological step. Believe in yourself first, not last. And the world, once again, is your oyster. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.